The Case of Alice. May Parkinson is an interesting case of a woman who killed her boyfriend because he refused to marry her. Before we dive into the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps to know if you like the video we have made. You can also leave a comment about the case. Parkinson was born in Hampton, New Zealand, in 1889. Around this year, Hampton was a small rural settlement in the wider Hawke's Bay region. In 1900, the town changed its name to Tikokino, due to there already being a location called Hampton in the South Island. With a population of less than 1,000, Tikokino has a mostly quiescent history. A few bushfires ravaged the town from 1889 to 1908, razing some houses and sawmills. Other than the looming threat of fires, the town that consisted of a general store, a bootmaker, a bakery, a blacksmith's forge, a butchery, and a post office was a quiet and peaceful place. Most people were farmers, and Parkinson's father was one of the laborers. He was married to a woman named Isabella Beasley, and together they had 12 children, including Parkinson. The family had a strong religious background. They belonged to the Salvation Army of New Zealand. At a very young age, around 1903, when Alice Parkinson was in her teens, she took a bold decision to move out of a family's house and work. As a family of 14, including her parents, it was very difficult for her father to take care of everyone in the family. At that time in Hastings, domestic service involved shortages, with families often relying on fewer servants. But here, Alice was lucky to find her first job as a domestic servant. After she turned 20, she worked as a pantry maid at Masonic before moving to General Hotels in that same city in 1909. Working as a waitress in one of the hotels in Napier, Alice met a man named Walter Albert West. West was a railway worker and had a relationship with Alice. For most romantic relationships in those days, these feelings develop naturally. They're a product of living together, sharing goals and dreams and working to make them a reality. But when partners lose sight of their individual needs, surrendering too much of themselves, the relationship will suffer. This was the case of Alice. She was so in love that she didn't want to lose West. She had to do everything to make sure they got married and lived together. In 1914, at the age of 24, Alice became pregnant. Since she only sees West, pregnancy outside marriage wasn't usually common in the early 1900s, as we must assume today. She told him about the pregnancy. West promised to marry her. This made Alice think that she would one day have a family with West and started saving a little. She gathered from work to support West to build a home. On January 1st, 1915, Parkinson underwent a complicated and painful labor, and the baby was born dead. After she had spent all her savings on a home for them, West rejected her, notwithstanding his earlier promise to marry her. Although Walter West had initially promised to wed Parkinson, he ultimately broke that promise. Thinking it might be financial issues why West hasn't made up his mind for the wedding, Alice took it upon herself and made arrangements several times in a church for them to marry. But West never showed up in any of the bookings Alice made. Alice felt disconnected from West. She wasn't hearing from him for weeks. This made her go to some of West's friends and ask them about the whereabouts of West. But West and his mates went out of their way to reject her. Alice was trying to save her reputation and make him keep his promise to marry her. To no avail. After weeks of hearing from him, one of West's friends told Alice that West was in Nelson Crescent, Napier. Alice then decided to first threaten West by letter. By doing this, she had hopes that West would rethink how serious she was. But West never wrote back, nor was he bothered about the threats and the pains Alice had shared in the letters. On the 2nd of March, 1915, She traveled to Nelson Crescent in Napier to look for him. Before she went, she had doubts about West. For the pains and failed promises he has given her, she had doubts that West would change his mind, so she took a gun along. In Crescent, she met West in Napier Park. In a hot confrontation, West physically pushed Alice. At this point, Alice had done all she could to save her relationship. With pain and feeling betrayed, she took out the gun she had bought for the purpose and shot him 4 times. At this point, all the plans she had hoped for were lost. She then shot herself in the forehead. West couldn't survive and died on the 5th of March. Alice slowly recovered. Although it was considered too risky to remove the bullet from her brain, she recovered to stand trial for murder at the Supreme Court in Napier in June 1915. The jury brought in a verdict of manslaughter with a strong recommendation for mercy on account of the provocation Alice Parkinson had received. The judge, Chief Justice Sir Robert Stout, was very angry and had no sympathy for Alice. All the evidence, the gun, and the letters she had wrote shows she had already made up her mind to shoot West. They said that because West has refused to marry her doesn't mean she should have shot him, but rather she could have sued him in court, and with that there was no provocation for her action. Luckily for Alice, she had a good lawyer, Barney Dolan. Dolan said Alice was acting in self-defense, that West tried to grab the gun, and Alice was forced to shoot him. The jury didn't accept this narrative from her lawyer. Chief Justice Sir Robert Stout sentenced her to imprisonment with hard labor for the term of her natural life. Dolan appealed the judgment and asked for a retrial, but Stout was also head of the Court of Appeal, and the application was declined. Alice Parkinson was sent to Addington Prison in Christchurch, then the only institution for women sentenced to lengthy terms of imprisonment. Almost immediately, her case was taken up by the New Zealand Truth newspaper, by the labor movement, and especially by the Wellington and Petone branches of the Social Democratic Party. Harry Holland, editor of the Maryland Worker, was an early and constant supporter, using the paper to campaign on Parkinson's behalf. Release Alice Parkinson committees, largely organized by feminists of the socialist movement, quickly gained widespread backing. There were big public meetings in Wellington and Auckland, and 3 petitions, the first signed by more than 60,000 people, requesting her release. This campaign continued throughout the war and into the 1920s. Although it eventually lost momentum, Parkinson's name and circumstances were still kept in the public eye. She was finally released into the care of her widowed mother at Tikukino in mid-1921. On the 4th of April, 1923 in Wellington, Alice Parkinson married Charles Henry O'Loughlin, a carpenter. They had at least 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. She died in Auckland on 21st July, 1949. Her husband had died in 1942.